Are we good to go, Nick?
Just one sec. Yep, okay, we're there.
Okay, great. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. We're just about to start. Sorry, we're just a few minutes late. My name is Ellen and I'm part of Shli Ella, or Action for a Planet Beyond Capitalism. I'll be co-facilitating the event tonight with Jacinta from Shli Ella as well. We're all just really excited for this event and are really grateful to the groups who are joining us here tonight and taking time to speak with us, because of course we know they're all really busy. We're also grateful to all of you who are watching this on the YouTube live stream. I'm just going to give a brief explanation and introduction to our group Shli Ella and to the other groups who are speaking tonight. And then I will outline the format the event is going to take and do a little bit of housekeeping, and then Jacinta is going to take over. This is our first webinar in a series, so hopefully everything will work out okay. And yeah, thanks for your understanding if it doesn't exactly go according to plan, but I'm sure it'll be okay. So about Shli Ella. Shli Ella is an anti-authoritarian climate action group, building an anti-capitalist climate movement on the island of Ireland. That's a bit of a mouthful, but basically we recognize that today's climate and biodiversity crises are intimately tied to our current economic system and to the oppressions that this is built upon, such as the class hierarchies and patriarchy, racism, colonialism, ableism. All of these are part of the economic system. The degradation and exploitation of the planet and the domination and subjugation of the living world, we believe, comes from this same logic as European colonialism, white supremacy, capitalism, etc., which all seek to control, to extract, and to continue to grow the profit margins of the world's most wealthy at any cost. So this destructive logic is really built into, the current economic system we live under, and we think that it's not possible to deal with the climate and biodiversity issues without or crises without also dealing with these other issues. Of course, we know it doesn't have to be this way. We believe in the power of self-organized communities to create the new world that we all need. We also believe in the possibility of a future where we can all thrive together with the living world. So we started our group last year, and we'd hoped to do a direct action climate camp this summer, but obviously that's not possible with COVID-19. So instead, for now, we're organizing these weekly webinars as a form of collective learning for ourselves and for our communities, and as a way of threading together intersectional and climate justice struggles here in Ireland and around the world. So as I said, we're really excited for the three groups who are joining us. We have a lot to learn from all of them about the power of collective organizing and radical struggle in response to crisis. And so, obviously we're all dealing with COVID-19 at the moment, which, like any crisis, impacts hardest on those who are already marginalized in society. So the current system obviously continuously excludes and oppresses marginalized groups of people and pushes them into poverty. It's therefore not surprising that during a pandemic, the state continues to fail to protect and support those it has pushed to the margins. Of course, the good news is that people are not powerless. They're coming together to organize, to connect struggles, to resist, and to rise up. So this event tonight hopefully will shed some light on those experiences of people whose existence, well-being and livelihoods are threatened by the state and the capitalist system which fails them. It will also highlight, of course, the strength and power of self-organization and collaboration on the ground, which is always ongoing. And overall, this will be a space for all of us to learn from these various forms of community resistance and how they've built collective power from the margins. So I'm going to just briefly introduce the groups now. So we have Kate with us from SWAY. SWAY is Sex Workers Alliance Ireland. They're an organisation working to advance the human rights, health, safety, participation and dignity of sex workers in Ireland. They provide non-judgmental support, information and referral to people who provide sexual services for money on a range of issues, including rights under the law, health and immigration. SWAY believe sex workers should speak for themselves, so they provide training, opportunities and platforms for sex workers to share their lived experiences with policymakers, politicians, the media and the public. They challenge discrimination and stigma experienced by sex workers in Ireland. Our next group is Massey, so we have Lucky joining us from Massey. Massey is the collective movement of asylum seekers in Ireland. They're a platform for asylum seekers and people who've gone through the system to join together in unity and purpose. They seek justice, freedom and dignity for all asylum seekers. They are independent, so they're not affiliated with any NGO or political party, and they demand an end to direct provision, the right to work and education, residency for all in the system, and an end to the brutal deportation regime. And as they say on their website, some might say these are not reasonable or realistic demands, but they have found that being reasonable achieves a little for asylum seekers, except more time being locked up in direct provision, deportation orders, and forced removal. Finally, then we'll have Oren, who is a member of CATU, speaking. So CATU is Community Action Tenants Union Ireland. They're a recently formed community-based union for tenants, including people living in emergency and precarious accommodation and mortgage holders. CATU, of course, comes out of a really long history of housing activism, and they aim to bring tenants and community members together to combat our common problems. They established the union because they want to take the basic ideas of membership, collective direct action, and grassroots democracy from where people work to where they live, and to collectively organise against the housing crisis. So briefly now, just for the format of the event, obviously it's not ideal having to be online and not really being able to have natural conversation. You know, we can't really see each other or the audience, so it's a bit strange for all of us. But we designed the format hoping it will be engaging for those at home and those of us participating in the call. So for that, we have 3 main questions, which we're going to ask each speaker, 1 question at a time. So each speaker will take a turn answering the question for about 5 minutes, and then we'll all move on to the next question together. Obviously, we need to keep to our timings kind of strictly if we're going to get through everything. So for the participants in the call or on this Zoom, I'm going to give you a warning, if that's okay, when the 5 minutes is almost up, and then when it's over, just so we can keep things moving. After that, we're going to have about 15 minutes of audience questions. So for people who are watching on the YouTube live stream, it would be really great if you could post any questions in the comment section and they'll be passed along to us. And yeah, we can get around to asking them. Obviously, we will be blocking anyone who's being offensive or trolling on YouTube. That'll then be followed by a few words from Shane, who is in Belfast and has been involved in food distribution as a way to support people during the pandemic. And he'll also give us a song to finish. And then Jacinta will close the discussion. So yeah, I think I'll pass over to Jacinta now. I'm sure that's enough of my voice.
Great, thanks, Ellen. Yeah, I suppose we can launch into the first question. And as Ellen was saying, we've seen that capitalism has already was failing groups that are pushed to the margins of our society, and we see that during a pandemic, that's made those already existing inequalities even worse. So if the speakers could just talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected sex workers, people living in direct provision, and tenants. So we might start with Kate first.
Great, thanks so much for having us. So I guess everybody here can agree that what this pandemic has exposed and laid bare is that marginalized people, especially in emergency situations, have so little support structures and safety nets. So pretty much all avenues that are awarded people who are more included in society have been unavailable to us. So, we have managed at this point to find somebody within the social welfare department who is helping us as an individual to get supplementary welfare payments for sex workers, but that's been a real issue, that if we're all being told, to stay home, to flatten the curve, particularly for people whose work is, we're the kissing and hugging workers. So there's an understandable sort of heightened interest in making sure that we don't have to go out to work, but the reality is that many people have had to, and that there is still sort of a demand for it. People, and we've been saying, if even a global pandemic can't end demand, then surely we need to acknowledge that nothing can, and that's because people still have mouths to feed. So we've been doing whatever we can to help people move to virtual work if that's possible. For a lot of people, they're not comfortable with that, or that's not a realistic option for them. But we've just seen that people's problems have completely compounded, and that even the sort of what it's like when your work is criminalized and stigmatized and we have no legal avenues, that just provides a whole host of issues for us, and even things as sort of far reaching as people who would wish to prohibit prostitution have worked really hard to lobby payment platforms such as PayPal or Revolut to say, oh, you shouldn't be having your service available for sex workers. And so what we see now is that when we're able and forced to, as we always are, within our own community, within our own industry, to support safety nets for each other, to do this crowd-funded hardship fund that we have on our website, it's been even tricky people accessing those funds from us, because PayPal and Revolut are scrutinizing people's payments and asking them to explain them. Any amount of virtual work that people are doing, they're also having a hard time receiving these monies because of the stigma from these payment platforms. We've also seen that, like I said, the sex industry was certainly not eradicated, but demand certainly did decrease. And so what that has meant for people that don't have any way of accessing support is that, for example, we helped a woman in Belfast who, when work dried up for her, she went to another city in the UK and took a boss who ended up deeply exploiting her, and it became a situation of trafficking. And so we had to do what we could, and were successful in helping her come back to Belfast. She had been, and so it's just that even if I can have a couple more minutes to say this, like any amount
2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Any amount of work that we, or power or agency that we can sort of muster gets co-opted from us. So we see things like when we have found a way to do virtual work, the only advertising place where we're forced to be, because advertising is illegal except for on this one site, they decided to do their own virtual site that drove the market down and put a cap on the amount of money that people can ask for, and then raked up the commission fee from it. So it's just that we see that unless we have a legal way of working, we can't, especially unfortunately in an emergency, depend on Gardaí. We can't depend on the state at this time until we're incorporated in society and respected. That's all for now.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I think that's a really good insight into the new barriers that got constructed, even when you're trying to work around in these time of crisis, the new barriers that are put in place due to this stigma. So thanks for that insight, and we'll talk more about that later, I'm sure. So we'll just go on to Lucky next for that question, just around how the pandemic has affected people living in direct provision.
Thank you for that, and good evening, everybody. To address this question here, the pandemic in direct provision. Firstly, the lack of preparation from the government side meant that residents in the DP centers could not observe the HSC guidelines of social distancing because of the overcrowding due to communal living space. Even after we highlighted this with the government before the lockdown started, all our calls were ignored by them. In DP, most people share their living space with strangers packed in numbers, 3 up to 5 sometimes in one room. It became impossible for people to maintain the required social distancing in direct provision. The reactional move by the department when the first case was confirmed made them to abruptly move people from the emergency centers, which were in Dublin, and they moved them to the countryside, places like Tullamore, places like Kerry in Kaisavin. And without even testing the people that when they were moving them, packed them in buses and then moved them, and people didn't even know where they were moving, and they were not even given enough time to prepare to pack their stuff and go. They did not test people before they did that. They did not assess the place they were taking people to. They just dumped people there. They continued to pack people and shared rooms where there was no chance of social distancing. Some of the beds, the bunk beds, people were put in bunk beds, and there was less than a meter between one bed and another. And people started getting sick. Those that got tested positive were moved from the centers to a place outside the center. And those that were tested negative, who were in contact with those that tested positive, isolated in-house. But the main thing that happened was the panic from the people in the centers when this happened. And they didn't know what to do because all this was handled recklessly by the department. We engaged the department to ask them to move some of the residents who were vulnerable so that they can be safe and not let this continue. The department refused, obviously, to listen to us. We collaborated with the local communities, especially in Kerry, to make them understand what was going on so that they don't reject the people.
1 minute.
Brilliant, that's all right. Also, one of the key issues that we had was the fact that the people that were working before the COVID in direct provision were refused to be paid the COVID payment because they were in direct provision. So we thought we still say that was a clear discrimination of the people that live in direct provision who were working before, and the government just ignored. Even, I mean, we challenged that as much as we could, but the social welfare department just refused to heed to that. Yeah, that is, yeah, I can stop there. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ilki. Yeah, and as you're saying, the government not even creating guidelines, but then picking and choosing who they're going to plan to make sure that they can actually be safe and follow those social distancing. And that's certainly not what they did, and put people in more harm in how they managed or completely mismanaged the situation. So we'll go on to Oran now with that question just around the impact on tenants.
Hi everyone, and thanks for Sliella for inviting us on this evening and for organising this. The pandemic has obviously affected tenants in lots of different ways, but one thing a lot of people are seeing is increased levels of financial precarity, because a huge number of people have had their wages cut or lost their jobs altogether since March. But despite this, they're still having to pay what were already, to begin with, extremely high rents. So the pandemic has then left many people struggling to pay their rents each month. And in many cases, people have been forced to move back in with their parents or other family. But of course, this isn't even an option for a lot of people. People who, with family members who are vulnerable to it, or people who don't have family living in Ireland. So that kind of leaves them in very precarious situations. And then other tenants have kind of been able to avail of or apply for rent supplement. But sometimes they even find that their landlords will refuse to accept this, or will kind of make up some excuse to not sign the rent supplement form, or will kind of like lie and say that they don't have a tenancy agreement or something like this. So like financial precarity and precarity in employment, while this was already a big issue for many people, in the last couple of years, the pandemic has even made it worse again. And obviously it's completely wrong that tenants should have to take on a huge amount of debt or be put in this position as a result of a global health crisis. Yeah, in March, the state implemented legislation to put in place a temporary ban on evictions. And this legislation at the moment is set to run out in July. But a temporary eviction ban without a cancellation of rent payments and without a cancellation of rent arrears that people accrued during the pandemic is essentially meaningless. It leaves renters who have struggled during the pandemic in extremely precarious. So really, like any ban on evictions needs to come with some form of rent relief or rent amnesty in order to have any kind of real effect for tenants. And I suppose this is another example of the state's failure to protect people and to protect tenants, where you have, on the one hand, landlords who are able to get breaks on their mortgage payments during the pandemic, while their tenants are still forced to pay the rent each month, despite the fact that they have breaks on their mortgages. And then I suppose, as well as financial precarity and a number of other things, just like Lucky mentioned, the pandemic highlights the level of overcrowding, even in private rented accommodation, especially in Dublin. Like if you're sharing a room due to high rents, you have very little to no privacy, and overcrowding and homelessness make any kind of self-isolation or social distancing very difficult or impossible for many people. And the fact that someone's ability to self-isolate or someone's ability to practice social distancing, these kind of basic things to protect against the coronavirus, the fact that this depends on them being able to find and afford accommodation that isn't overcrowded, really highlights how the pandemic impacts those who are already vulnerable and those who are at the lower end of social and economic hierarchies. It affects these people the most.
1 minute.
Yeah, so the pandemic really highlights how capitalism completely fails to meet people's needs. We see housing and access to housing is treated as something to be sold for profit rather than a basic need. And this facilitates the exploitation of tenants by landlords by allowing them to charge massive rents for very poor quality and overcrowded accommodation. Yeah, so that's a question for me.
Thanks, Oren. Yeah, and thanks for just sharing that, I suppose, that experience of tenants. And a lot of tenants were already in very precarious situations before this, but yeah, that's that increased precarity that the pandemic has caused. And just for the next question, and some of you touched on this a little bit already, but just around how you and your groups have continued to organise during the crisis, and any lessons learned from organising during a pandemic and during crises, but also to look at, if there's time, a little bit around just your general organising, because I think your groups or the movements you're involved in, they've worked on building collective power and claiming space in the discussion around issues that affect you and your communities. Oftentimes you're often blocked, or the powers that be don't want people who are directly affected by these issues to be in those discussions. So even some of those lessons learned from your organising over the years of kind of claiming that space, reframing the kind of narratives around these issues. So we can go to Kate first again.
Great. So as I mentioned on our website at sexworkersallianceireland.org, you can see right on the front page that we have a crowd-funded hardship fund. And so that has been our main way of trying to support people. You can go and donate any amount to it. And then we've just been, posting on various forums and WhatsApp groups, and then sending individual comms via text and email and phone calls, letting people know that we have €100 to give to people. So we were able to give 170 people that amount, and then we've been able now to go back and let people know that we can give that to them again. And we've been participating in various webinars and conferences and such with other sex worker organizations to find out what they're doing, and then just decide for Ireland what really makes sense to us, what can we offer that people need right now. And overwhelmingly it is money. And so, and like I said, sex workers, we really have played a big part in trying to help each other not have to work, and trying to help each other set up for virtual work in flattening the curve. But it's been all within our own community and our own industry, and it's just so indicative of people who are forgotten about in society. So in Migrant Rights Centre Ireland was able to get a policy that there would be a firewall for undocumented people, but unfortunately, what happens even at the best of times is that policies aren't always executed and carried through on a local level. And so just case by case, there has been a lot of chaos, but a lot of one-on-one interaction and trying to help people understand, considering all of their unique circumstances, how best we can support them in this moment. We were very lucky to be able to hire a new staff person, a new caseworker who can do this, who can focus on this exclusively. So that's been really wonderful. But as I said, this pandemic, the way that it's encroaching on everybody's financial situation, and that's not just individuals, that's organizations, that goes as far as funders. And so even funders that have specifically existed to help marginalized people are having to shift around their funding due to COVID, and it's adversely affecting sex worker organizations. So so yeah, once again, it's you know, we looked at and considered various ways of doing outreach, and we're developing an outreach program right now. And we've done a lot of work with people working in the street, and we've just had so many sex workers who have sort of come into the fold, if you will, and just come on our radar, and just passing things word of mouth. Particularly in the street where people were having to work, but where, you know, we were hearing stories of Gardaí holding people overnight, not based on any exact law, because as you said, the government's like, it was even a little bit unclear what guidelines were. So not even citing any specific law, just taking them in overnight and saying, we're doing this for your own good. And it's
1
just
minute.
like, sure, thanks. But again, what people have needed was money. And so we've been trying to do whatever we can amongst ourselves to make that happen.
Great, and just go to Lucky for that question next.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity again. And at Mercy, we believe in communication, and I am passionate about organizing. And one of the things that we did during this lockdown of this pandemic is we managed to keep talking online with the members in all throughout the country. And that has made the people to be able to come out. We created that opportunity which we wouldn't have before. And people had to learn to use Zoom, learn to download Zoom, because we actually now have a weekly, every Tuesday, we have a national weekly meeting with all the people throughout the country. And we have learned that a lot of problems that people do face in their centers, which they are unable to speak, and they have an opportunity in the forum that we created for them to let us know as a group what is it that they are facing, and we come up with the solutions of how to address those issues that they have personally or as a group in the centers. As you would know that the centers, the way that they are set up. One of the things that also helped during the troubles of CAISAVIN, so we had every day meetings strategizing as to what is the next move that they must do. They were really thankful for the opportunity that we created so that they didn't feel alone. So our organization made them to be able to be strong, make those protests that they did. We featured in Parliament longer than ever before during this COVID, because it is something that we, through the media, local media and other mainstream media, they didn't have nothing to do. So that became something for them. So which was great, because that shifted the momentum. It went to the Parliament, and also throughout. I mean, as people remember, 3 weeks ago, where we collaborated with other groups to have a protest or a march in line with the Black Lives Matter, and also to highlight the issues of direct provision. And also that just moved they created that awareness, and the the way that people now view direct provision. So it made people to pay attention to direct provision. And it's all about what we did from inside as people who are in direct provision, and let people know what is going on. So it is really encouraging that we can learn from each other. And it is also important to understand that we demanded the government to respond at some stage. And they made their errors as well in terms of responding. They were giving false statements and all that. And we kept on challenging them. And it's all because we strategize, we meet, and we say, we get ready. What is it that we want to tell the public and everybody else?
1 minute.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wrapping up. Yes. Also, as I close, we also are participating in what they call expert advisory group as Mercy. So we have a membership there. So they meet every week, and then we feed that to the group every Tuesday. So it gives us an opportunity to give feedback to the people right away as to what is it that is happening. And as you can see now, people are talking about ending of direct provision, something that has never been spoken for 20 years by the so-called policymakers. So we keep going, we keep pushing until the system ends. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucky. And then we'll just go to Oran.
Yeah, so as a union, I suppose CATU's strength is in its numbers. So a lot of the focus over the last couple of months has been to grow the union through recruiting new members. And the pandemic has disrupted CATU's normal way of doing this. Before, we would have gone door knocking in local areas and communities and talked to people on their doorsteps about the issues they were facing and basically encouraging them to join there. And just talking to people about the issues they see in the area or the issues they're having with housing, and asking questions like, who's responsible for these issues? How can we approach these issues? How can we solve them collectively through collective action? And using these kind of questions as a way to politicize people and motivate them to join the union. So instead of being able to do door knocking face to face, to recruit new members, we've been mostly kind of calling friends, family, and neighbours of existing members of CATU, and having these same kinds of conversations with them over the phone, and encouraging them to join. So as well as that, we've been promoting the union online through various social media. I think one kind of form of support that I think is kind of helpful during the pandemic, when a lot of people are feeling isolated due to social distancing, is just kind of calling members of CATU, existing members, giving them phone calls, just to check in. And just because people feel very isolated, and it's can be good to have an update from the union and for them to hear what's going on, and to create kind of a greater sense of solidarity between people while everyone's separated. And as well as that, we last Saturday, all of the local branches that have been set up had held socially distanced outreach stalls in their communities. So our local group here in Crumlin in Dublin had a stall in Crumlin village, and we were basically just talking to people in the area, members of the community, again about the union and their housing issues and that sort of thing. So over the last couple of months, there's been 4 local CATU branches that have been set up in Dublin, and membership has been growing really quickly. 3 of those groups actually have launched since April, or since the pandemic restrictions have been in place. So the local groups usually launch once there are about 10 to 15 members in an area, and then the members can elect a committee and vote on and decide on a campaign to focus on, while continuing to grow the union in their area and talk to their friends and neighbours and that sort of thing. So our local group here has decided on a campaign to focus on no evictions, and obviously the aim there is to prevent any evictions through putting pressure on landlords and letting agents in the area, and defending our members through like direct action when necessary. Recently, 2 members in our local branch were being harassed by their landlord, who was coming over to their house and repeatedly trying to force his way into their home and banging on the doors, banging on the windows, and just very kind of aggressive, harassing behaviour.
1 minute.
Yeah, thanks. And luckily, in that situation, some CATU members who live nearby and sympathetic neighbours were able to come round and come to their defence. And it was great to see that kind of example of a physical support that a housing union can offer in a community. So yeah, so far the local groups have all been set up in Dublin, but CATU membership is open to people anywhere on the island of Ireland. And hopefully we'll see branches setting up across the country very soon, because there are members across all of Ireland. It's not just focused in Dublin. Yeah, so that's kind of been some of what we've been up to lately.
Great, thanks, Oran. Yeah, and it's great to hear, you know, there's no stop to organising during a pandemic. And I think everyone's given a picture of like the really practical things that have been happening, from the hardship funds or the practical support of someone being there to stop an eviction or to support tenants. And then also, I suppose, that space that the pandemic has created to really put a spotlight on particular issues, for example, direct provision. I mean, it's been amazing to see that there's actually, you know, that there is media coverage and there is much more conversation, and in some ways that the government's hands been forced on some issues like evictions and direct provision, really to pay attention. And then also, of course, yeah, those networks of support and solidarity that are really important across all the different communities people are speaking from. So we'll just move on to the final question, and then we'll move on to the questions that are coming in on YouTube. So for us, building a radical climate movement, it's about challenging all systems of oppression. So like racism, imperialism, sexism, capitalism, all the isms. And I suppose there's been a long history of erasing diverse voices and perspectives from the climate movement in the global north. So for your groups, what would you like to see climate groups do in terms of your struggle, or engage and support your struggles? And do you have any ideas about how we can work together in practical ways to build the world we want, to build a world beyond capitalism and beyond these other systems of oppression? So I can go to Kate first, yeah.
So I think a few people have said that coronavirus can be seen as like a dress rehearsal for what the climate crisis is going to look like soon, you know, and so I think we can see the havoc that is wreaked, and it should be giving us an opportunity to insist on more socialist policies that can provide safety nets for people. And it's also revealing what what will work going forward. Like even a small example of, we typically would have held drop-ins in a private and safe location for sex workers only. Well, we've been doing them online now, and we've discovered that that they're probably the way to go forward for us anyways, because sometimes it has been tricky for sex workers to leave their wherever they were staying in case they might miss a booking or something like this. So now we see, actually going forward, you know, even as isolating as it is to do sex work, as isolating as lockdowns are, these virtual drop-ins might be something that we can adapt as a way going forward that will be better. And you know, as we go in and out of these kinds of crises, likely. And I think that's the thing, is that like you know, climate crisis, the manifestations of that, the famine and war, etc. we'll be creating more and more sex workers, more and more people who are having to take this as work as the only or best work that they have for them. And so we have to be prepared to better serve people who exponentially their lives are thrown into chaos. And so from the people who are here in this virtual room now, it's I think for us it's a lot about just naming each other, just the solidarity amongst us talking about the overlapping and shared struggles that have to do with evictions and housing, that have to do with direct provision and racism. So the more that we can name each other, the ideally less and less possible it will be for these rotating Taoiseachs to just to just not even mention us. And so and for that matter, maybe there's just space for, even in virtual drop-ins, to have discussions about consuming less meat or something. I mean, the coronavirus has really played off of people's paranoia is so and judgment of each other is so much stronger now, and and scrutiny of each other. And so even something like, if we can allow for inserting conversations that sort of allow people to just consider how you needn't be vegan to maybe just eat a little bit less meat, so that we can then affect the sort of land use part of the global crisis. But again, it's about policy. It's clearly about the state doing a better job of having policies, whilst we consider to just scramble around organizing collectively amongst ourselves. We have to make it impossible to ignore us. And part of that is just getting the words out there. Sex work is work. This is an economic activity. We need to mention tenants and how sex workers are evicted. We need to mention how sex workers of color are exponentially subjects of invisibilization and violence. So I look forward to this moment. There, as much as there is heightened paranoia, there is a strengthening of people like us.
Thanks, Kate. Just going to Lucky.
Okay. Three things are important to me in any campaign for it to be a success. It's to mobilize, to educate, and to act. That's what climate change needs to be doing, and be consistent with the message that they want to drive home for people to be aware. You got to mobilize. Not everybody is aware about and take notice into what the dangers of climate change. And so when I say mobilize, it's all about going out there. Nobody can follow a campaign if they don't know anything about it. So for you to have an opportunity to educate people about the campaign, you need to get to the people in whatever form or way that you can possibly do. Well, people were able to mobilize during the COVID. Post-COVID, there has to be a plan as to how are we going to be able to get this message to the people, for instance, who are locked in direct provision. Remember, there are over 7,000 people who are locked in direct provision, who are removed from the mainstream news or activities that are happening because they have that fear. So we need to be able to penetrate that community to be able to know what's going on. so that everyone can act accordingly, because the main aim is for that to reduce this. But if we don't educate people, we will be wasting our time. But let's do that, and it can go a long way. Capitalism is a disease, racism is a disease, and we need to keep talking about it until people realize and don't just say that I'm not racist because I have one friend, you know. It has to come to it must be natural. You must feel that equality is there, that justice is there. Without justice, there is no passage in us. We have to create that way that those we make as much noise that they must talk about it in that parliament where they make these decisions and policies. We must make noise. The new government must not sit down and wait for 5 years for things to happen. We need to force them to make things happen here, now, on all these issues that are affecting people socially. That's all.
Thanks, Lucky. And we'll just go to Oren now.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a tricky question to answer, I suppose. But I think it'd be great to see more support between climate and ecological groups and people involved in housing struggles and all other struggles happening in Ireland right now. And see that these struggles are related, as they're both results, or they're all results of capitalism and neoliberalism. I think when we talk about building community power, it can't just mean, and it doesn't just mean fighting landlords. It means as well opposing all these forms of oppression that we've named, such as racism and patriarchy, in order to create a better alternative, which we know is possible, climate and biodiversity, as two parts of the same struggle rather than two separate, unrelated struggles. As well as that, I suppose, as we're facing into now a period of severe economic downturn and recession, and that's going to make organised grassroots groups and radical movements across the country, it's going to make them even more vital than ever in order that we can build strong, diverse, resilient and supportive communities to fight for climate action and to fight against state-imposed austerity. And to base kind of our relationships within these organizations and between them, rather than not to have them as transactional relationships, instead that they should be based on ideas of solidarity and mutual aid. And yeah, that's about that for me.
Great, thanks, Oren. Yeah, and I think, yeah, like Kate said, this is this pandemic, it really is a the dress rehearsal for the crises, the further crises that we're going to face. And I think the response and the focus on networks of mutual aid and solidarity and support, and connecting across struggles, I think there's really good groundwork that's happened, I think, and that it would be great to build on. And I think Ellen has some questions from YouTube.
Yeah, so we are going to move on to about 15 minutes or so of audience questions. We probably won't get to all of them, but we'll try to get to them. So me and Jacinta are maybe going to alternate. I'll ask one and then she'll ask one, and some are for specific speakers and some are kind of just general. So if anyone wants to jump in and answer them, the general ones, that's perfect. And maybe if it's just for a few minutes. So two questions that kind of tie together are and again, it's kind of a big question, but what are the best lessons that you have learned in the course of your activism about how to push for real change? So I'm sure we'd all be very interested in that. And it kind of ties with a question that says, can the panel share any examples in Ireland or beyond of grassroots groups, community groups, networks, wins, or significant structural change, please? So I suppose about, yeah, examples of where change has happened. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and take that.
I'll respond to that there. So what we are fighting for is full decriminalization of sex work. So that is something that that we're probably in this moment we've gotten further away from, as they recently for the first time criminalized the purchase of sex and increased penalties for sex workers working in pairs of groups, calling that brothel keeping, even if it's just 2 workers. They face inordinate fines and potential jail time now. These have been increased penalties in the past 3 years. So I think what we know about policy is that a lot of the time, what needs to happen is that politicians need to feel safe to vote in terms of what we need for our struggle. So for us, a lot of it is about sort of accessing and affecting the hearts and minds of people, and culturally reaching out to people who can speak these things for us, who can mention sex work as work, and who can say the words full decriminalization, so that more and more politicians can feel safe saying that to the, to all of the powers that may be. So, we do look to the models that are in Australia and New Zealand, but even they don't go far enough, as migrants can't work legally in those spaces. So we need for people to be speaking up to say, listen to sex workers, take direction from sex workers about what they're saying they need, specifically in Ireland. And that would be full decriminalization of the sex industry, obviously including for migrants and avenues of safe and legal sex work for undocumented people as well. So I'll say that about affecting hearts and minds, and about insisting that key populations be listened to, and that people take direction from us specifically.
Thanks. Does anyone else want to come in on that? No? Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Good. All right. The example of where change happened. You see, as a campaigner or as an activist, you need to understand that the route that you take is a long route, and it has no shortcuts. And you need to understand the mind of the policymaker and the reason why the policy is being made, and to put the marginalized people down there and make them to understand or feel that they don't need to take action. Okay, so I campaign for the right of asylum seekers here in Ireland, and the policies are made to marginalize or the people that seek asylum, and to make and put them in direct provision, and make them believe that it is okay to be in direct provision because we are provided this, provided that, and that makes you not to take action, whereas your life is not going your way. So we and you have to believe as well on the action that you want to take. You need to see what you are calling for. You need to see it happening before you can even start. So one of the things I would say in terms of us in direct provision, 20 years ago, or in 2017, not until 2017, 2018, people that seek asylum, didn't have a right to work at all. It was a law. And we believed that the law was wrong. We believed that the law was wrong. And we kept on saying that people must be given the right to work. From day one, we got together. We believed that the pillar that is holding direct provision was the right to work. We fought, we made noise, and the policy was changed. Just because we were still not happy with the change, with that policy having changed. We did not celebrate because we knew that there were restrictions. So we continue to fight for a better right to work for people that seek asylum. We continue to do so because we believe it can change. It has changed before, but we need it to shift. We do collaborate with other groups, even outside the Republic, who are facing the same issue in the north, in Glasgow, and in UK. We've got groups that we collaborate with which we face the same issues, and we fight together, whether physically or by pen, supporting each other's campaigns and actions. So that is what, as an activist, keeps doing. You keep doing, and you don't give up because you think there's a policy that is above you. You need to be at that level of belief that it will change. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucky. Yeah, I think it's really important to take account of the changes that have actually happened from people's work over the years, to show us that, yeah, we can do more moving forward, especially when we work together. I have a question that's come in for Oren, if you want to answer this one. So the idea of a rent strike has gained popularity during the pandemic. Does a rent strike seem likely in Ireland at the moment? What are the organisational obstacles under COVID-19? If you want to.
I suppose I can't speak too broadly on that because I suppose I'm not sure how likely a rent strike is at the moment. I suppose it's definitely if the kind of community support was there and the physical and financial support for people when they needed it was there and the commitment was there, it would be a very exciting prospect. But I suppose I'm not sure how likely it is at the moment.
Definitely would be amazing, but yeah, definitely a lot of work to organise and figure out. So hopefully someday we'll have a rent strike.
Definitely.
Jacinta,
Yeah.
do you want to ask another question?
Yeah. So so there's one question here around how do the speakers feel climate change could exacerbate the issues that their communities are already faced with?
So as I mentioned, there are likely to be more and more people doing sex work, particularly because it is an avenue of survival for people who have come from other countries that are in much worse off situations, and like people have said, like we said, like, you know, famine and war, these kinds of things that come about from climate change will end up creating more people doing sex work. So unless there are viable alternatives, there need to be viable alternatives to doing sex work regardless. You know, we need trans opportunities for employment opportunities for trans people and for single mothers and for undocumented people and for people who use drugs and all of these, and for homeless people and all of these things. So you know, because the best way, particularly whilst sex work remains quasi-legal, we have to work preventatively so that people don't end up doing sex work that don't want to. And we have to work considering what the sort of legality of sex work is to make it as safe as possible. So so we will need to continue to fight for full decriminalization whilst whilst addressing the sort of root causes of the kinds of poverty that make people vulnerable to exploitation in this industry, because there are undoubtedly going to be more and more sex workers. Like I said, that they you know, sex work persists not because overwhelmingly men have a sense of entitlement to buy sex. Sex work exists because for people who have little to nothing or need an amount of flexibility for their lives, it's work that that is always an option. People will always have their bodies to be able for that. And so so yeah, it just becomes more and more urgent that we find ways for this to be safe work and for there to be other options.
I will definitely.
Lucky, did you want to come in on that, or? Are you okay? Or Oren?
Okay. You're muted right now, Lucky, if you did want to.
Yeah. Yeah, can you hear me right?
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, it's very, very important that we connect the struggles. Half the time here, the attitude that we have here in Ireland is that if an issue doesn't affect me, I look away. All right? There come a time where we got to connect the struggles. We got to know about a group that is suffering and stand together in solidarity. That's what is needed. The climate change campaign is no different to the the homelessness and rent surge, or migrants, or reproduction rights, or people living in direct provision. All those need to be connected, because why the policymakers always win is because at ground level, people don't really get together and amplify their voices for a cause. So if, for instance, there is a march and awareness on climate change, if you go back to what I said, you would have educated people, you mobilize people, and everyone will win if everybody go together or work together. You know, the saying of a rising tide that lifts all boats. That is what should be happening. So we should not say, okay, this one is a climate change, this one is a sex workers campaign, so you don't want to associate with that, but you are all struggling on the ground, because the capitalists keep on winning because they have the capacity to press us down. So we need to lift ourselves and hold our hands in solidarity. Then we can see a change. Thank you.
Absolutely. I don't think we've much time left for more questions, but there was a few more that were interesting, and unfortunately we just don't have that much time. But someone had said something like, where can people donate time or money to if the groups want to name any yeah, any places people can do that. So I don't know if you want to just briefly mention any of the ongoing campaigns, and we can obviously share the links to them then on YouTube and on Facebook and stuff.
So our hardship fund can be accessed on our website, sexworkersallianceireland.org, and you'll just see it right on the front there. It'll say hardship fund, and you can click right into it and see how you can donate, and tell your friends too as well. Thanks.
Loki has just commented massey.ie, so we'll obviously share the links to that. And Oren, you already said obviously people can sign up to CAT2.
Yeah, I suppose the best thing if people want to be involved or support CAT2, the best thing is to join as a member. And if there's more members living near you in your area, you can join up with them and start the groundwork for a local group there. So if you want to join, you can go to cat2ireland.org is our website, and we're also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Great. Yeah, we'll share all those links later. So that was such an interesting discussion from everyone. Like, I'm sure we could keep talking for hours if we had the time, but we don't have much time left, and we have one more person to get to, which is Shane, if you're there. Hey, Shane.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
All good. I'm not sure if I'm here or I can't see myself, but how's it going?
Great.
So
we were told that you might talk to us just for a minute or two about some stuff you've been involved in Belfast. It's like food distribution. I believe it's called Food Robin Hood.
provisionally, yeah. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you want to give us a few minutes with that, and then you're gonna sing us a song, I think.
Yeah.
So that'd be great. Thanks.
Oh, there I am. Jesus. So I have been, I've been recycling a load of food from different dumpsters around different places. I've been asking some friends who are involved in food retail to donate some food. I have been putting call outs on the internet for sanitary bits and bobs, face masks, just like nice bits and bobs that people have or want to donate. And I have been making food boxes and just delivering them around different people in need. It all just started in at the start of this sort of Corona period, where I was made aware of sort of a really large amount of people who were really struggling. Some people without paper, some people who weren't able to go down to food banks and stuff like this. And once I sort of put the feelers out a wee bit more, all of a sudden I'm getting sent lists of 10 houses with 10 people in each house, and so I just I am always living out of the dumpsters, and I'm always overwhelmed by the amount of food that I get. And I just thought, I've got a bit of time on my hands. I'm going to actually organize this shit properly. And like, I've been going out, like, bringing the car down to the bins, pulling it up and just filling the car full of food, and like finding really good places. And and of course that you have to be very specific about what sort of food you're like dishing out to people. It's not like you can just give like, whatever I would eat to anybody. I only give people, really fresh produce or pre-packed bits and bobs and stuff that's obviously super sanitary that anybody could eat. It's just actually been super overwhelming to see the amount of people in need. Absolutely overwhelming. And
that's great.
Here I am.
It's shocking. Like, again, just shows how capitalism doesn't actually meet people's needs, and like we have massive overproduction of food that's then wasted and like is exploiting the earth's resources, and then it's not even actually reaching people who need it. And even though we know it could, it's so gross. But yeah, it's really great to hear of practical things people can get involved in and organize themselves and respond in a way that does build this collective community power. So that's really, really great.
Yeah.
Would you like to give us a song?
Yeah. So I was all geared up to sing you a new song here. I have to change my angle here. Sorry, I'm not in my best garments. Yeah, I was all geared up to sing you a wee fresh song, but this is a golden oldie that talks about the idea of nature standing up and taking the reins for a second in in this world that we're living in. Yeah. March down mossy hill, a force of earth in whose land and Merlin cries a battle begins. Take no more advances from crazy humans. Will take no more advances from crazy humans. There's a purpose in my nature did not create. Triumphant excuses for acts out of hate. You divide the land into province and state. Maybe your own people to make extinct. Maybe your own people to make extinct. You block out the life force by means you see fit. The exploited masses struggle to exist. The exploited masses, some active and whole. Yo, thanks very much.
Thanks, Shane.
Cheers.
God, I can't wait till we can all like hear live music again. That'll be really great. We all need it. So just before Jacinta is going to close the discussion and kind of tie it together a little bit, we can't really end this without wishing Lucky a happy birthday. It was his birthday a few days ago, and it's just such a pity he didn't get to have a party because these parties are always so great. So I think we need to try to sing happy birthday across Zoom. I don't know if that's going to sound very good, but we're going to attempt it. So maybe someone who sings can start us off.
Happy
Go on, Shane.
birthday to
To
you.
you.
Happy
Happy birthday to
you.
you.
Happy
Happy birthday, dear Lucky. Happy birthday to you.
That was an interesting mix of noises.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Viva, viva,
Happy
viva.
birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate that.
Aw, great. So thanks to all our speakers and musicians for taking the time. And I think it was really great to hear from kind of across really diverse movements, but also I think really really crucial movements as well in terms of like challenging the kind of broken system that we're in and creating a different world together. So I think there's lots of inspiration to be taken from learning about the building of community power and creating those networks of mutual aid and support. So I think, yeah, it's been really great to have you all on this platform together. And thanks everyone for tuning in as well, for tuning in on YouTube. And so this is the first in a series of webinars. So we'll be having more on at the same time every Thursday. So we'll be doing them up until I think 6th of August will be the last one. And so the webinar next week is on feminist economics and the politics of care. So that one will focus on using a feminist economic lens to look at our economic system and how capitalism kind of divides labor into what it would term productive and unproductive labor, and how that so-called unproductive labor is grossly undervalued, but how the system can only function because of this unproductive, unpaid labor. And this labor is extremely gendered and often primarily done by women of color, migrant women, and working class women. And I suppose the pandemic has showed how reliant we are on these essential workers, but also how they're treated as sacrificial. So we think, again, it's a really important conversation for us to have in this kind of conversation around the world that we want to create, and have these conversations around what should be valued, and what's important for us in creating kind of different ways of living and being together, and ways of being that supports kind of people and the planet. So yeah, that'll be next week, and we'll have there'll be a few speakers, and Conor McCabe will be one of them, and someone from the Belfast Cleaning Society, which is a workers' co-op based in Belfast, and there'll be some other speakers as well. So we'll announce them during the week. So you can find that event on all our social media platforms, and if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, you'll get notifications of the next stream. Yeah, so thanks a million again for everyone for joining us, and yeah, hopefully we can keep the conversation going for the next few weeks. And yeah, it's been a really great start, so thanks everyone. So I guess we can if we can just say goodbye from everybody. I think is everybody in view? I think we can.
And thanks as well to everyone who did like the background tech stuff for Shliada, because that all looked really hard and complicated, and I think he made it work, so thanks. Yeah,
thanks to everybody doing all that very difficult stuff, all the difficult invisible work. So, yeah, great. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.